Chapter 1. The Man Who Didn't Look Away. Max Jones had learned, over the years, to read people the way other men read headlines. It wasn't the words that mattered most. It was the pauses, the way someone held their shoulders, the careful overuse of politeness that signaled fear instead of courtesy. Divorce law did that to a person. It taught you how to listen to what wasn't being said. Which was why, when the intake assistant forwarded him a routine consultation, Max knew it wasn't routine before he even picked up the phone. The notes were sparse. Client, Thomas Davis. Request, confidential divorce consultation. Urgency, high. Additional, client requests discretion due to safety concerns. Max closed the folder slowly. At 39, he had mastered the art of not rushing. He had learned that urgency, real urgency, required calm, not speed. He adjusted his tie, not because it was crooked, but because habit grounded him, then pressed the call button. "Mr. Davis?" he said when the line connected. There was a breath on the other end. Controlled one. Measured. "Yes, this is Tom." Max noted it immediately. No hesitation, no tremor, but tension threaded through the voice like wire under skin. "This is Max Jones. I'll be handling your consultation today. Before we go any further, I want you to know this call is confidential, and nothing you say leaves this conversation unless you authorize it. Are you somewhere safe to talk?" Another pause. Slightly longer this time. "Yes," Tom said. "For now." That was enough. "All right," Max replied evenly. "Why don't you tell me what's bringing you to us?" Tom didn't start with feelings. He didn't start with accusations. He started with logistics. "I'm married," he said. "I want a divorce. I work from home. I need to leave without my husband knowing beforehand." Max leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Because?" Silence stretched. Not empty, heavy. "Because if he knows," Tom said carefully, "I won't get the chance to leave." Max didn't interrupt. He waited. Let the words arrive when they were ready. "There's been violence," Tom continued. "Not constant. Not always obvious. Enough that I've learned to plan quietly." That did it. Something inside Max hardened. Not into anger, but focus. The kind that had made opposing counsel fear his cross-examinations. The kind that had carried him through the worst months of his life after his wife died suddenly, pain crashing in without warning, leaving him hollow and functional at the same time. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this," Max said. "Not as a script. As fact. Thank you for telling me. I'm going to ask you some questions, and some of them may feel intrusive. You don't have to answer anything you're not ready to. But the more I know, the better I can protect you." Protect. Tom exhaled softly. "That's why I called." They spent the next 40 minutes outlining a quiet strategy. Separate finances, digital security, a temporary relocation, filing under conditions that would limit immediate contact. Max spoke clearly, efficiently, but never coldly. He didn't sugarcoat the danger, and he didn't dramatize it either. At one point Tom laughed, brief, humorless. "You're very calm about this." Max allowed himself a faint smile. "I've learned that panic doesn't help people who are already afraid." Tom absorbed that. When the call ended, Max sat alone in his office for a long moment, staring at the city beyond the glass. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the skyline. He felt the familiar ache settle in his chest, the one that came when responsibility weighed heavy, when he knew a man's safety now rested partly in his hands. He thought of his wife, of how sudden loss rewired a life in seconds, of how violence didn't always announce itself with shouting. Sometimes it arrived quietly, patiently. He picked up his pen and wrote a single word at the top of Tom's file. Priority. That evening Max made calls. Discreet ones. A short-term furnished apartment under a shell LLC. A colleague who specialized in protective orders. And, after a brief consideration, another number, one he hadn't dialed in years. A private MMA trainer who worked with trauma survivors. Not because Tom had asked, because Max understood something important. Survival wasn't just legal. It was physical, mental, ongoing. And Tom Davis, Whoever he truly was beneath that careful voice deserved every advantage. As Max closed the file, he didn't think of romance. He didn't think of attachment. He thought of duty, and he never once considered looking away. Chapter 2. Controlled Exits. Tom Davis had learned, over time, how to move through his own home like a guest. Not in the obvious ways. It was subtler than that. He minimized noise, timed his work calls carefully. Survival had taught him efficiency. So when Max's email arrived, subject line neutral, content minimal. Tom read it 3 times before allowing himself to breathe. Departure plan attached. Please read carefully. Delete after. He did. The plan was thorough, almost unnervingly so. Tom had expected legal steps, paperwork, filing timelines. He hadn't expected foresight. Tom sat back in his chair, staring at the screen. He worked for one of the biggest tech companies in the country. He dealt in predictive models and risk assessments. He knew competence when he saw it. Max Jones wasn't just competent. He was precise. That evening, Tom's husband came home late, irritated, already halfway to an argument before his keys hit the counter. Tom listened, nodded where necessary, kept his responses neutral. He had learned that resistance invited escalation. Inside, though, something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, Tom wasn't just enduring. He was preparing. 2 days later, Tom arrived at Max's office under the pretense of a co-working meetup. He wore a baseball cap pulled low, jacket zipped despite the mild weather. His laptop bag was heavy, not just with tech, but with documents Max had asked him to bring quietly over time. Max met him in the lobby, tall and solid in a charcoal suit, expression unreadable but eyes sharp. "Mr. Davis," he said, offering a hand. Tom hesitated for half a second before taking it. The handshake was firm, respectful. No lingering. No assessment disguised as friendliness. Max released him immediately, gesturing toward the elevators. "Follow me." The office was calm. Neutral colors. Soundproofed glass. A space designed to make people feel less like they were falling apart. They sat across from each other, files open. In person, Max seemed even more composed than on the phone. Not distant, just contained. Like a man who'd learned the value of keeping himself steady so others could lean without breaking him. "I want to walk you through the exit timeline again," Max said. "Not because I think you forgot. Because repetition builds control." Tom nodded. "I appreciate that." They reviewed everything. The day Tom would leave. The ride that would pick him up 2 blocks away. The burner phone waiting at the apartment. The filing delay designed to buy him time. When they finished, Tom leaned back, arms crossing instinctively. "You arranged the apartment under your firm?" "Under a holding entity," Max replied. "Untraceable unless someone knows where to dig." Tom studied him. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Max said simply. There it was. No heroics. No insistence on gratitude. Just fact. Max slid another sheet across the desk. "There's one more thing." Tom's jaw tightened slightly. "If this is about testifying." "It's not," Max interrupted gently. "It's about you." Tom blinked. "I noticed you mentioned self-defense training during intake," Max continued. "Given the situation, I reached out to someone I trust. Private MMA training. Trauma-informed. Discreet." Tom stared at the paper. His hands trembled. Not with fear, but something closer to disbelief. "I didn't ask for that," he said. "I know," Max replied again, calm as ever. "But I won't force it on you. This is an option. Control in a different form." For a moment, Tom didn't speak. His throat felt tight, pressure building behind his eyes that he refused to release. No one had ever anticipated his needs like this. Not without expecting something in return. "You're a very thorough," Tom said finally. Max's gaze softened. "Not enough to be sentimental, but enough to be human. I've learned that preparation saves lives. And peace of mind." Something about the way he said learned made Tom wonder what it had cost him. As Tom left the office later, the city felt different. Still dangerous. still loud, but less consuming. That night, alone in bed beside a man who slept heavily, unaware, Tom stared at the ceiling and imagined leaving without chaos, without shouting, without being dragged back. He imagined a door closing softly behind him. Across town, Max sat in his apartment, suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up. He opened his laptop to review case notes but found himself pausing, fingers hovering over the keys. He thought of Tom's controlled voice, his quiet strength, the way he absorbed information like armor being fitted piece by piece. Max closed the laptop. This case would be complicated. Legally, ethically, emotionally. But for the first time in years, Max felt something stir beneath the familiar weight of responsibility. Not attraction, not hope, purpose. And that, he knew, could be just as dangerous. Chapter 3. Learning to breathe under pressure. The gym was nothing like Tom expected. No blaring music. No walls plastered with hypermasculine slogans. Just clean mats, neutral colors, and a faint scent of disinfectant and rubber. Private. Intentional. Tom arrived early, heart thudding in his chest as if it were bracing for impact. He'd told himself this was practical. A skill. Another layer of protection. Still, his body didn't care about logic. Trauma lived in muscle memory. The trainer introduced herself simply as Elena. Mid-40s. Calm eyes. A presence that didn't demand trust but made space for it. "We go at your pace," she said. "No surprises." Tom nodded. He liked that. They started with breathing. "That's it?" Tom asked, surprised. Elena smiled faintly. "If you can't breathe under pressure, you can't think. If you can't think, strength won't save you." It took him 20 minutes to realize his shoulders had been clenched near his ears. By the end of the session, his arms shook. Not from exertion alone, but from releasing tension he hadn't known how to name. When he stepped back outside, his phone buzzed. "Max Jones. Session went okay? No need for details if you don't want." Tom stared at the screen. The message was neutral, optional, respectful. "Tom, yeah. Better than expected. Thanks." He hesitated, then added, "For setting it up." The reply came a minute later. "Max, you're welcome. Hydrate." Tom laughed quietly to himself, the sound unfamiliar but real. They met again 2 days later, this time in Max's office, the door closed, blinds half drawn. Filing day was approaching. The air felt heavier with each step closer to it. "Your husband hasn't noticed any changes?" Max asked. "Not yet," Tom said. "He's suspicious by nature, but he hasn't said anything." Max made a note. Suspicion is manageable. Certainty is not. Tom shifted in his chair. "I keep thinking I should have done this sooner." Max looked up. "Most people think that. It doesn't make it true." Tom studied him. "How do you know?" "Because I didn't get the chance," Max thought. Out loud he said, "Because survival runs on timing, not courage." The words landed heavier than Tom expected. They reviewed restraining order contingencies, digital footprints, safe routes. Max's voice never wavered, but Tom noticed the way his jaw tightened when they discussed worst-case scenarios. "You're allowed to say if this is too much," Tom said suddenly. Max blinked, caught off guard. "I mean," Tom continued, awkward now, "for you deal with this kind of thing a lot." Max leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I deal with it because someone has to, and because I'm good at it." That wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. Later that evening, Tom packed his go-bag. Just essentials. Clothes that didn't wrinkle. Chargers. Documents sealed in plastic. He hid it behind the false panel in the closet he'd installed months ago under the excuse of cable repairs. He didn't feel brave. He felt methodical. Across town, Max stood in his kitchen, staring at a framed photo on the counter. His wife's smile was bright, unguarded, frozen in a time before aneurysms and phone calls and the sudden quiet that followed. "You'd tell me to be careful," he murmured. She always had. Max wasn't crossing any lines. He knew the rules. The boundaries were clear. Still, he felt the weight of responsibility pressing differently now. Not just legal but personal. He slept poorly that night. Tom's husband noticed the gym bag 2 days later. "What's that?" he asked, voice casual in the way that meant it wasn't. Tom kept his tone even. "Training. Gym near the house." His husband's eyes narrowed. "Since when?" "Couple weeks," Tom said. Not a lie. Just incomplete. The hand on Tom's shoulder was light. Possessive. Testing. "Trying to get strong?" his husband asked. Tom met his gaze. Didn't flinch. "Trying to stay healthy." The silence that followed was sharp. That night, Tom texted Max with hands that shook just enough to notice. "Tom, he noticed the gym." The response was immediate. "Max, thank you for telling me. Are you safe right now?" Tom swallowed. "Tom, yes." "Max, okay. We'll adjust. You did nothing wrong. You did nothing wrong." Tom repeated the words to himself like a mantra, breathing the way Elena had taught him. Slow, grounded, present. He wasn't free yet, but he was learning how to stand his ground. Chapter 4. Fractured Walls. Tom had learned to read William's moods, to anticipate the storm. He thought he was ready for anything. He was wrong. William came home early. Not irritated, furious. The apartment shook under the force of his footsteps. Keys slammed on the counter. Then a hand hit the table so hard that Tom flinched instinctively. "Where have you been?" William demanded, voice tight, sharp, ready to snap. Tom started, but William cut him off, shoving him back against the wall. The impact knocked the air out of Tom's lungs. "Don't lie to me," William roared, grabbing Tom's wrists and twisting them behind his back. Pain lanced through Tom's shoulders, spine arching. He struggled, trying to break free, but William's strength pinned him. I'm not lying," Tom gasped, voice trembling. Fear and anger collided in a storm that made him dizzy. William's fist came next, hard, straight into Tom's abdomen. The breath left him in a painful whoosh. Tom stumbled, tried to push back with his legs, but William was relentless. Another punch, this one grazing his jaw, left blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Tom whimpered. The sound startled him. He wasn't used to hearing himself vulnerable like that. His body reacted instinctively, flailing to create distance, but every attempt was met with overwhelming force. William's grip didn't falter. "Stop squirming," William growled, dragging him toward the kitchen, slamming him into the wall. Pain exploded across Tom's back as his head snapped against the corner. Dizziness blurred the edges of the room. He tasted copper. His own blood. Tom tried to think. Focus. Escape. The burner phone. Max. The plan. Any shred of rationality. But William's fists and weight pressed down, and Tom's mind screamed in panic. "Please," he whimpered. Not a plea. A desperate instinct to survive. William's hand clamped over Tom's mouth. "Quiet." But a gasp escaped anyway. He twisted, wrenched, tried to break free. His head throbbed. His mouth burned. Every movement made William angrier, stronger, relentless. Tom's foot found the fridge. He shoved with everything he had, desperate for leverage, but William's hand tightened on his wrist like steel. Another shove. Another slam. Tom's body hit the wall again, head colliding with the frame near the bathroom. Dizziness. Stars exploding in his vision. Finally, a sliver of opportunity. A second of William adjusting his grip, distracted. Tom bolted for the bathroom, blood slicking his lips, heart hammering so violently he feared it might betray him. He slammed the door shut, fumbling for the phone. Hands trembling, bleeding, shaking. He finally gripped the burner phone Max had given him. Dialing with urgency, each second stretching like a lifetime. "Tom." Max's voice was calm, controlled, a lifeline through the chaos. "Max, he's hitting me." He. Tom stammered, barely able to breathe, the room spinning, pain radiating through his body. "Stay on the line. I need you to breathe," Max instructed, steady as ever. "Can you lock the door?" Tom fumbled at the lock, shaking so hard that the mechanism slipped once before clicking. His back pressed against the door, chest heaving. Blood from his lip dripped onto his shirt. William slammed into the door from the other side, shouting curses, trying to break it open. Tom whimpered, pressing himself against the corner, trying to stay out of reach. "Max, please, I'm sending help," Max said firmly. "Stay calm. Stay low. Don't let him see you panic. You're going to be okay." Tom pressed the phone against his ear like a lifeline. His legs trembled. Every scream, every flinch, every instinct to fight back. He had tried. He had been overwhelmed. He had been slammed, beaten, helpless. The door shook again. William's voice was a growl of pure rage. Tom's mind spun, fear and pain blurring together. But he clung to Max's calm voice like a tether. "Almost there," Max said. "Hold on. Just hold on." Tom slid down to the floor, knees drawn to his chest, breathing uneven, head spinning. He could hear the muffled sound of William pounding, the harsh scrape of furniture, the metallic clatter of kitchen implements thrown aside. Blood ran into his eyes, dripping down his cheek, but he didn't move. He couldn't. He could only wait, only breathe, only survive. "Max," he whispered, voice cracking. "I can't, he's. "Stay alive, Tom," Max said firmly. "Help is coming. You are not alone. You will get out." And for the first time in hours, amidst pain, blood, and terror, Tom clung to the possibility of safety, the one Max had promised. Chapter 5: Extraction. The door shattered before Tom even had time to process the sound. A crash, a shove, and suddenly William was off balance, caught entirely off guard. Max's team had arrived, silent, disciplined, moving with precision that Tom could barely comprehend through the haze of pain. "Tom, stay down." Max's voice cut through the chaos, calm and commanding. Tom dropped to the floor instinctively, feeling blood trickle into his hair, his temple throbbing. The last moments of the assault replayed in a nauseating loop. The slam against the wall, the fist to his jaw, the panic that had consumed him. One of the extraction team members, a tall man with short-cropped hair and a stern expression, grabbed William by the arms, twisting just enough to immobilize him. William struggled, shouting curses, but Max's team had trained for exactly this kind of situation. "Move!" Max barked. He was already at Tom's side, hands gentle but firm as he helped him to his feet. Tom stumbled, dizzy, his legs trembling under the weight of adrenaline and blood loss. He barely registered the pain radiating from his ribs, his back, and his head. Max's arm around his waist steadied him, anchored him in reality. "You're safe now," Max said, voice low, almost soothing, yet still sharp with authority. "I've got you. Don't fight. Just follow me." Tom tried to speak, to explain the panic and terror that had built in him, but his lips trembled. Blood coated his mouth. He swallowed roughly. I thought You did everything right," Max interrupted gently. "You called. You survived. That's all that matters." The extraction team moved swiftly, ushering them down the hallway and out of the apartment. William's shouts echoed behind them, but the sound felt distant, muffled, as though the world had condensed into the immediate safety of Max's presence. Once in the car, Tom sagged against the seat, finally allowing himself to feel the weight of what had happened. His body ached in a dozen places, his head throbbed, and his mouth stung with every shallow breath. Max stayed close, hand resting lightly on Tom's shoulder. Not patronizing, not intrusive, just there. A reminder that someone was watching, that someone had orchestrated this chaos and emerged with control intact. "You're going to a safe location," Max said quietly, eyes forward on the road. "Medical evaluation first, then temporary housing. You won't see William again unless legally necessary, and even then, it'll be controlled." Tom nodded weakly, unable to trust his voice. He closed his eyes and let himself lean into Max's steadiness. For hours, fear had dominated, leaving him raw and exposed. Now, for the first time, he allowed a flicker of relief. The safe house was quiet, sterile, intentionally unpersonal. A bed, a bathroom, minimal furniture. Tom collapsed onto the mattress, every muscle screaming. Max followed, sitting in a chair across from him. "You need stitches," Max said bluntly, tilting his head slightly as he assessed the blood dried along Tom's temple and lip, "and we'll monitor for concussion symptoms. But you're alive, and that's what counts." Tom blinked, swallowing thickly. "I thought I was going to die." Max's jaw tightened, eyes darkening slightly. Not with anger at Tom, but at the situation at William. "You were in serious danger. And that's exactly why we accelerated the plan. You survived because you did exactly what you were supposed to. And because help arrived." The weight of that hit Tom in waves. He had always thought survival depended on his own strength, his own careful planning. But now, he realized, survival could also mean letting someone else orchestrate it, guiding you through the storm. Max leaned back, studying him with a careful gaze, neither pity nor condescension. "I need you to rest now. You've been through trauma. Your body and mind need time to recover before we do anything else." Tom's eyes filled with tears, not from fear, not from pain, but from release. His whole body trembled as he allowed himself to let go, just for a moment. Max watched him silently, knowing better than to force conversation, better than to push words. Some battles were fought in silence. Some trust was built in quiet moments of vulnerability. And for the first time since contacting Max, Tom realized that someone had truly been on his side. That someone could protect him. Somewhere beneath the adrenaline and blood, beneath the bruises that would take weeks to heal, a tiny ember of something else flickered in Tom's chest. A recognition that he wasn't entirely alone. Max, sitting in the dim light of the safe house, allowed himself a faint exhale. He couldn't undo what had happened, couldn't erase the violence, couldn't bring Tom's fear back into the past. But he could ensure safety now. He could protect. And that, for now, was enough. Chapter 6. Quiet Wounds. The safe house smelled faintly of antiseptic and fresh linens. Tom lay on the bed, head wrapped in gauze, bruises blooming across his arms, shoulders, and ribs. The pain was constant, a dull ache that refused to let him forget what had happened. He blinked at the ceiling, counting the shadows cast by the muted streetlight outside. His mouth still stung from the punch, every swallow a reminder of his vulnerability. For hours, he had drifted in and out of sleep, unable to silence the echoes of William's shouts, the slam of the walls, the overwhelming force that had pinned him. Max stayed close, a quiet presence in the corner of the room. Not hovering, not intrusive, just there. An anchor. His dark eyes softened as they flicked toward Tom every few minutes, checking for movement, for signs of pain, for breathing patterns. Tom wanted to retreat, to be alone. He wanted to convince himself that asking for help was weakness. But the truth was undeniable. He didn't want to be alone. Not now. Not ever again in that state. "You're awake," Max said quietly, not moving closer, just observing. Yeah," Tom croaked. His voice was rough, ragged. "I didn't sleep well." Max nodded, expression unreadable but understanding. "Nightmares?" Tom swallowed hard, words catching in his throat. He didn't want to admit how vivid they were, the pounding fists, the suffocating rage, the helplessness. But he nodded. "Yeah, every few minutes. It's him coming after me. I can't stop seeing it." Max leaned back slightly, giving him space. "That's normal. Your body's processing trauma. It's loud because your mind is trying to make sense of what almost killed you." "I feel weak," Tom admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "I couldn't fight him off. I couldn't." He broke off, swallowing a sob. "I screamed. I whimpered." Max's jaw tightened, but there was no judgment. Only a careful, steady focus. "You survived, Tom. You did exactly what was necessary. Screaming, struggling, that's human. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you alive." Tom swallowed, blinking against the sting in his eyes. The truth in Max's words seeped slowly into him, a fragile warmth amidst the bruises and blood. I don't know how I kept going. Max finally moved, stepping closer, but carefully, almost ritualistically, placing a hand lightly on Tom's forearm. Not to dominate, not to intrude, just to reassure. You didn't keep going alone. You had help. You allowed yourself to be protected, and that's strength, too. Tom's chest tightened at the touch. Not fear, not shame. Something else entirely: recognition, trust, connection. He swallowed again, looking down at Max's hand. The gesture was simple, yet it carried weight he hadn't expected. I'm not used to that, Tom admitted softly. Someone being there, and not judging me. Max's eyes softened further. You don't have to be used to it. You just have to accept it. The room was quiet after that. Just the two of them, the low hum of the city outside, and the sound of Tom's uneven breathing as he tried to settle. His head still throbbed, and every bruise screamed. But there was something fragile and grounding in Max's presence. Hours later, sleep finally came. Fitful, shallow, but sleep nonetheless. And in those shadows between dreams, for the first time since contacting Max, Tom allowed himself to imagine a life where he wasn't entirely alone, where he could trust someone with the weight of his fear, his pain, and even his cautious hope. When he awoke again, sunlight was filtering weakly through the blinds. Max was still there, reviewing notes quietly, the corner of his mouth tightening in concentration. He glanced up briefly, catching Tom's eyes. You're improving, he said, physically and mentally, but we'll take it slow. No rush. Tom managed a small, tentative smile. Thanks for staying. For everything. Max inclined his head, nothing more. But Tom felt it anyway, the acknowledgement, the promise, the unspoken connection forming between them. A bond built not on words or romance, but on trust, care, and the shared recognition of vulnerability. Later that evening, as Tom closed his eyes again, the nightmares returned, but they were quieter this time. He imagined Max there, steady, capable, untouchable by the shadows that haunted him. And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to drift, even if only for a moment, toward the fragile hope of safety, and perhaps eventually something more. The bruises would fade. The headaches would subside. But the lessons of trust, of letting someone in, of survival together, those were only beginning. And somewhere deep inside, Tom knew he would never forget that presence, that quiet strength, that unwavering calm. Max had given him something no plan, no escape, no skill could ever replace. A reason to believe he could be safe and maybe even whole again. Chapter 7: Legal Armor. Morning light filtered through the blinds, painting the room in pale stripes. Tom sat on the edge of the safe-house bed, still tender from the beating, the gauze on his head clean but itchy. His arms and ribs ached with every movement, but he had survived. That was what mattered. Max watched him from the chair across the room, hands folded, expression unreadable but focused. He didn't make the space feel smaller. He didn't hover. He simply was solid, present, grounded. You're making progress, Max said finally, breaking the quiet. Physically, I mean, and mentally. Tom managed a weak, tired smile. Mentally, feels like a battlefield, he admitted. Every time I close my eyes, I see him, William. Max nodded, his tone calm but firm. That will fade with time. You're not alone in this. We'll take it step by step. And legally, we're already moving. That's the next line of defense. Tom blinked at him. The legal side? Yes, Max said. Your divorce, protective orders, restraining orders, temporary custody if necessary. We've already started drafting petitions and compiling evidence. That includes documenting your injuries, witness statements, and any proof of abuse. The courts need to see the full picture. Tom swallowed, a lump forming in his throat. He had imagined lawyers before. Stiff, formal, distant. Max was neither stiff nor distant. He was precise, meticulous, and somehow reassuring, even when discussing the brutal reality of his situation. And the extraction. Tom started, unsure how to phrase it. The safe house, the team that got me out? Max's jaw tightened just slightly. The firm doesn't own any of that. It's not something law firms provide. But I have connections. Private security consultants, trusted shelters, law enforcement allies. All coordinated to keep you safe. You were never alone, but you were never exposed to unnecessary risk either. That's how we work. Tom's eyes widened slightly. So, you really planned all that? I did, Max said, leaning back. But it's not just me. It's the network, the system, the professionals who understand these situations. My job is to navigate it all legally, to ensure you have both protection and recourse. A silence settled between them. Tom let it wash over him, letting the weight of reality sink in. For once, he didn't have to fight everything alone. For once, someone had his back. Strategically, legally, and physically. I trust you, Tom said softly, almost a whisper. But the words carried the weight of everything he'd been through. Max's gaze softened for the briefest instant. Good. You need to. That trust is part of your safety. They went through the legal documents together, Tom following Max's lead as the lawyer explained each motion, each protective measure, each calculated step. Temporary restraining orders, divorce filings, emergency custody measures. Tom felt a strange mix of relief and anxiety. Relief because action was being taken. Anxiety because it made everything real. William's reach wasn't gone. It had just been constrained by law. Later, when the safe house was quiet, Tom found himself moving toward the small corner where Max kept his notes. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever stop thinking about it all? The cases, the clients, the violence?" Max's expression darkened, but not with anger. You never stop completely. You manage it. You compartmentalize. And you do your best to protect the people in front of you. Tom nodded slowly. I never realized. You can be kind and methodical at the same time. Max allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It's necessary. Otherwise, the weight crushes you. Hours later, Tom trained quietly with Elena in a corner of the safe house's exercise space. She modified the session to account for his bruises, emphasizing controlled movements and situational awareness rather than full strikes. Max watched silently, occasionally offering guidance, how to maintain stance, how to protect himself without overextending. Tom felt something stir inside him, a quiet confidence that wasn't there before, not just from the training, but from the presence of someone steady, someone he could rely on without fear. He realized slowly that Max was no longer just his lawyer, his protector. He was becoming a touchstone, a figure he could lean on emotionally in ways he hadn't allowed himself in years. That night, Tom lay on the bed, bruised, tired, but alive. His head still throbbed, his arms ached, but the nightmares didn't feel as sharp. And somewhere deep beneath the pain, he recognized a fragile hope. That maybe, with Max beside him, legal armor, emotional anchor, protective force, he could survive, heal, and even start believing in safety again. Max, watching him from the corner, allowed himself a quiet thought he wouldn't voice. This wasn't just about law or protection anymore. He cared. More than he expected. And for the first time in years, he felt the possibility of something worth holding on to, if he could navigate it carefully, if they could survive the next stages together. The legal case was underway. The safe house was secure. And for the first time, Tom allowed himself to believe that his life might not only be free of immediate danger, but that it could, eventually, feel whole again. Chapter 8: Courtroom Shadows. The first notice of the divorce hearing arrived like a hammer against Tom's chest. Max handed him the envelope personally, sitting across from him at the small table in the safe house's living area. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and the lingering tang of bruises and blood, reminders that safety was never guaranteed, even here. This is the formal notification, Max said, voice calm, precise. The court date is set for 2 weeks from now. Everything we've prepared, protective orders, evidence of abuse, documentation of your injuries, Is being filed under the court's priority protocols. Tom nodded, throat tight. 2 weeks. That's not long. His fingers fidgeted with the edges of the envelope, tracing the raised print like it might anchor him somehow. No, Max agreed. Which is why we'll move carefully. You won't be exposed unnecessarily, but we need to make every argument airtight. The filings are being processed as fast as legally possible, and the court will treat your protective orders with urgency. Tom exhaled shakily. And William? He'll know I've started the process? Max hesitated for just a moment before answering. He'll receive formal notification after the petition is filed. But until that point, your movements remain confidential. The safe house, security measures, the network, we maintain control. Tom swallowed. Relief mingled with fear. The situation felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon he couldn't see the bottom of. He'd survived before. He could survive again. But this time, there were eyes watching him. William's eyes. And consequences that might reach further than he could anticipate. He glanced at Max, realizing for the first time how much he relied on him. Not just for protection or legal guidance, but for the quiet assurance that someone was watching his back. The thought made his stomach twist, unsteady, but also something new. A sense of connection he hadn't felt in years. Tom, Max said, noting the shift in his expression. Focus. Legal proceedings are about evidence, documentation, and presentation. Emotion is secondary, but it's still yours. Don't let him intimidate you outside of the courtroom. That's my job. Tom nodded, drawing in a breath that felt heavier than air should be. I don't want him to know we're coordinated, or that you're helping me beyond the legal side. Max leaned back slightly, arms crossed. He will suspect something eventually, but until he has proof, we control the narrative. And your safety comes first. Days passed. Tom's training with Elena continued, slow and methodical, focusing on technique and awareness rather than power. His body healed, but the scars, both physical and emotional, remained. Every movement reminded him of the attack. Every shadow reminded him of William's rage. Yet, through it all, Max's presence anchored him. One evening, after a session, Tom lingered in the small exercise corner, breathing heavily, sweat cooling on his skin. Max stood nearby, reviewing documents for the upcoming filings. You're improving faster than I expected, Max said without looking up. Not just physically, mentally too. That fear you had is still there, but you're learning to channel it instead of being paralyzed by it. Tom glanced at him, a mixture of gratitude and something unspoken tugging at his chest. I couldn't have done this without you, and I don't just mean the legal stuff, or the safe house. His voice dropped. I mean you. Max's head tilted, a flicker of something. Interest, concern, understanding, passing through his eyes. You're allowed to rely on me, he said quietly. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. You survived because you asked for help. The room fell into silence. Outside, the city hummed with oblivious normalcy, unaware of the storm that had shaped this apartment and these two people. Tom exhaled slowly, the tension in his body loosening, just slightly, as he realized that the presence he feared might be suffocating was instead steadying. But danger had not gone away. William was already suspicious. Tom could feel it in the sharpness of his nightmares, the way even mundane noises made him flinch. The divorce filing was imminent. The protective orders would put a legal barrier between them, but they were only as strong as the court's enforcement and the security network supporting Tom. Max didn't ignore the threat. Every filing, every motion, every legal maneuver was meticulously calculated. He anticipated every loophole William might exploit, every intimidation tactic he might try to use. And through it all, Tom was learning to trust the plan, and to trust Max. That night, as Tom lay in the dim light of the safe house, he allowed himself a thought that had seemed impossible weeks ago. Maybe he didn't have to carry everything alone. Maybe he could survive, heal, and even hope because someone else, someone formidable, steady, and unflinchingly competent, was standing with him. And Max, seated in the corner, reviewing court documents, allowed himself the same thought. Protecting Tom had become more than legal duty. It was personal. And he wasn't about to let William's suspicion, or rage, change that. For the first time since the attack, Tom felt a fragile sense of control, a cautious spark of hope. The legal battle was beginning, the danger still very real, but for the first time he didn't feel entirely alone. Chapter 9. Lines that blur. William didn't need proof to be dangerous. Suspicion alone was enough. Max learned that the hard way when a private investigator flagged a vehicle idling across the street from his office for the third time in 2 days. Same car, same driver, different hours. Could be coincidence? The investigator said carefully over the phone. But it doesn't feel like one. Max stared out the window, jaw tight. It's not. William was hunting. Not with strategy yet, but with instinct. An instinct, when paired with entitlement and rage, was volatile. Max ended the call and immediately adjusted the case file's access levels. Fewer staff. Encrypted communications only. No predictable routines. He sent a brief, coded message to Tom. Max, we're tightening protocols. Nothing to panic about. Just stay where you are. The reply came quickly. Tom. Okay. Too quickly. Max didn't like that. Tom had felt it too. The shift in the air, the way fear had sharpened into something colder. William hadn't been able to reach him, not directly. But the absence itself had become a provocation. The nightmares changed. They weren't just about fists and walls anymore. Now they were about being watched, followed, found. Tom woke one night gasping, sweat-soaked, heart racing so hard it hurt. His ribs screamed as he sat up too fast, bruises protesting. Hey! Max's voice came from the doorway, low and steady. He hadn't been sleeping either. Tom's throat closed. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You don't have to apologize, Max said, crossing the room but stopping short of the bed. Always careful. Always aware. Talk to me. Tom rubbed his face with shaking hands. He's looking for me. I can feel it. Max didn't dismiss it. You're probably right. That honesty did something dangerous to the space between them. Tom let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in his chest for days. I hate that I'm scared again. I hate that I need you here to feel steady. Max met his eyes, held them. Needing support after trauma isn't weakness. It's biology. Tom huffed a quiet, humorless laugh. You always make it sound so clinical. That's how I keep from lying to myself, Max said softly. The words lingered. William's first legal response arrived 2 days later. Not through court. Through intimidation. A message left with a mutual acquaintance. A veiled threat passed along like gossip. Tell Tom he can't hide forever. Tell him I know he's not alone. Tom read the text 3 times, fingers numb. He thinks it's you, Tom said quietly, handing Max the phone. Max's expression didn't change, but something dangerous sharpened behind his eyes. Let him think whatever he wants. He still doesn't know where you are. But he's connecting dots, Tom pressed. The timing, the lawyer, the resources. Yes, Max said. And that's why we're drawing firmer lines. Tom stiffened. What kind of lines? Max hesitated. Professional lines. Emotional ones. The unspoken ones that had begun to blur in the quiet moments. Late-night conversations, shared silences. The way Tom's body relaxed when Max entered a room. We need to be careful, Max said finally. Not because of you, because of optics. If William believes there's a personal relationship, he'll weaponize it. In court. In his narrative. Tom swallowed. So what changes? Max held his gaze. We don't give him anything he can twist. The distance in his tone hurt more than Tom expected. Right? Tom said, nodding. Of course. Lawyer-client. Max flinched internally. This was the problem. He cared. And caring made mistakes possible. That evening, Tom trained harder than he should have. Elena noticed immediately. You're pushing past recovery, she warned. I need to feel strong, Tom snapped, then immediately softened. Sorry. I know, she said. But strength isn't just force. It's restraint. The words echoed uncomfortably. Later, Tom sat alone on the safe-house balcony, city lights flickering like distant stars. He hugged his knees to his chest, breathing slowly, trying to ground himself. Max joined him a few minutes later without a word. "I didn't mean to shut you out earlier," Max said quietly. I won't let him hurt you again. Not physically. Not legally." Tom looked at him, eyes tired but honest. "You already haven't." The silence that followed was thick, charged. "I trust you," Tom said. "And I know this is complicated. I'm not asking for anything I shouldn't." Max's voice was low. "Good. Because right now, the safest thing is patience." Tom nodded. "I can do patience." He couldn't say forever, but he could say now. Across town, William stared at a photo of Max Jones pulled from a law firm website. Sharp suit, calm eyes, the kind of man who didn't look like he broke easily. William smiled. "So," he murmured, "that's who you ran to." The hunt was no longer blind, and the lines Max and Tom were trying so hard to maintain were about to be tested. Chapter 10, Pressure Points. The temporary restraining order was granted at 9:17 a.m. Max watched the timestamp appear on the court portal, jaw tight, shoulders squared. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was leverage. Legal distance. Consequences if William crossed the line again. He printed the order, signed where necessary, and made 3 calls in quick succession. One to the court clerk, one to law enforcement liaison, one to the private security consultant coordinating Tom's protection. Only then did he exhale. When he arrived at the safe house, Tom was already awake, sitting at the kitchen counter with a mug of untouched coffee between his hands. His posture was rigid, alert, like his body hadn't yet accepted that the world could pause without punishment. "It's in place," Max said. "The tiaro. Effective immediately." Tom looked up slowly. "So, if he comes near me, he'll be arrested," Max finished. "No warnings. No second chances." Tom nodded, absorbing it in layers. Relief came first, then fear, then the inevitable question. "And if he doesn't care?" Max didn't sugarcoat it. "Then we're ready." They sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of it settling between them. "William hired counsel," Max added. "Aggressive. Known for scorched earth tactics." Tom's hands tightened around the mug. "Of course he did. That means intimidation, character attacks, and attempts to paint you as unstable," Max continued evenly. "Which is why documentation matters, and why boundaries matter." Tom met his eyes. "You mean us?" Max didn't dodge it this time. "Yes." The honesty felt sharp but necessary. William's first formal response arrived that afternoon. An emergency motion alleging marital abandonment, financial misconduct, and, Max's jaw clenched, undue influence by third parties. "He's implying you manipulated me," Tom said, voice tight as he read. "He's implying I'm the reason you left," Max corrected calmly. "Which means he's scared." "That doesn't make me feel better." "It should," Max said. "Fear makes people sloppy." Still, the implication landed like a bruise. Tom paced the living room, movements restless, frustrated. "I hate that my safety is being turned into strategy. Like my pain is just leverage." Max watched him carefully. "It shouldn't be. And I won't let the court reduce it to that." Tom stopped pacing. "How do you do this? Stay calm when everything's trying to tear you apart." Max hesitated. "Practice," he said finally. "And loss." Tom didn't press, but he remembered it. That night, Tom's nightmares returned with teeth. He woke gasping, heart racing, convinced for one horrifying second that William was in the room. His hands shook as he shoved himself upright, chest tight, lungs refusing to cooperate. Max was there almost instantly. "Hey," he said quietly, crouching near the bed. "You're safe. Look at me." Tom did, anchored himself to Max's steady gaze, to the familiar calm in his voice. "I hate this," Tom whispered. "I hate that he still gets to live in my head." Max nodded. Trauma doesn't follow legal timelines. Tom laughed weakly. Figures. Silence stretched. Can you stay? Tom asked, hesitant. Just until I fall asleep again. Max considered the implications. The lines. The risk. Then he pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat. I can stay, he said. That's allowed. Tom's shoulders relaxed almost immediately. He fell asleep 10 minutes later. Max didn't move for hours. The next day brought escalation. William violated the restraining order, not directly but cleverly. A message sent through a third party. A photo of the old apartment door. Caption: You can't hide forever. Max forwarded it straight to law enforcement. That's enough, he said, voice low and lethal. We're requesting an arrest warrant. Tom stared at the screen, nausea curling in his gut. He's not going to stop, is he? Max met his eyes. No. But now he's making mistakes. Tom exhaled slowly. I don't know how I'd survive this without you. The words slipped out before Tom could stop them. Max froze. This was the line. The one neither of them had named, but both had felt tightening. You are surviving this because of you, Max said carefully. I'm just part of the structure. Tom nodded, accepted the answer, even if it wasn't the whole truth. That evening, as Max prepared court briefs at the kitchen table, Tom watched him from across the room. There was something grounding about the way Max worked. Methodical, precise, unshakable. Someone who stood between chaos and consequence and refused to blink. For the first time, Tom wondered, not with hope, not yet, but with curiosity, who is Max Jones when he isn't holding the world together for other people? And Max, sensing Tom's gaze, wondered something just as dangerous. What happens when this case ends? And the silence begins. The pressure was building. In court. In William. In them. Something had to give. Chapter 11. Fault lines. The arrest warrant didn't come fast enough. Max knew that intellectually. Warrants took time, paperwork, signatures. But logic didn't quiet the unease that had settled under his ribs. William was escalating. The messages had stopped, which was worse. Silence in cases like this usually meant planning. Max doubled security anyway. New routes, new schedules, fewer windows of vulnerability. He didn't tell Tom how close they were skating to the edge of what was legally permissible. There was no need to add that weight. Tom already carried enough. I feel like a walking fault line, Tom said one evening, sitting on the floor of the living room, back against the couch. Like if I move wrong, everything cracks open. Max closed his laptop. You're not responsible for his choices. I know, Tom said. I know. But my body doesn't. Max nodded. That's normal. Tom looked up at him. You say that a lot. Because people don't hear it enough. That earned a quiet smile. The deposition notice arrived 2 days later. William wanted Tom under oath. He's fishing, Max said calmly, laying the paperwork out on the table. Trying to provoke inconsistencies. Trying to get you rattled. Tom's stomach flipped. I don't think I can sit in the same room as him. You won't, Max said immediately. Remote deposition. Protective order in place. He won't see you. But he'll hear me. Yes, Max said gently. And that's why we'll prepare. Preparation became their shared routine. They sat across from each other for hours, rehearsing answers, breaking down questions, identifying traps. Max was meticulous but never condescending. When Tom stumbled, Max didn't correct, he guided. Try grounding before you answer, Max suggested at one point. Feet on the floor. Breath steady. You're allowed to take a second. Tom tried it. Nodded. You'd be terrifying to go up against. Max allowed a thin smile. I've been told. You ever enjoy it? Tom asked. Being lethal in a courtroom? Max paused. I enjoy clarity. Accountability. The moment when someone realizes the narrative they built won't save them. Tom studied him. You talk like someone who's lost something big. Max didn't look away. I have. They let the silence hold it. The night before the deposition, Tom couldn't sleep. Not from nightmares this time, but anticipation. The kind that coiled tight in his chest, sharp and restless. He found Max in the kitchen at 2 a.m., reading through notes by the dim undercabinet light. Couldn't sleep either? Max asked without looking up. Tom shook his head. Feels like I'm standing on a ledge. Max closed the folder. Then let's move you back from the edge. They sat at the table, hands wrapped around mugs of tea neither of them really wanted. What if I freeze? Tom asked quietly. What if I sound weak? Max met his eyes. Survivors aren't weak. Courts just weren't built with that understanding. That's my job. To translate your truth into a language the system respects. Tom swallowed. And if he twists it anyway? Then I object, Max said. Relentlessly. Something in his tone, fierce, protective, made Tom's chest ache. Max, Tom said softly. Why are you doing this? Max didn't deflect this time. Because no one stepped in fast enough for my wife. And because you deserved safety long before you asked for it. The honesty landed heavy but warm. Thank you, Tom said. Max nodded once. Get some rest. I'll be right here. The deposition was brutal but controlled. William's lawyer pushed hard. Implied instability. Suggested exaggeration. Danced around the word violence like it was a technicality. Tom held his ground. He breathed. He paused. He answered only what was asked. And when William's voice broke through the speaker, tight, furious, barely restrained, Tom didn't crumble. Max watched from his screen, pride sharp and unexpected in his chest. When it was over, Tom sagged back in his chair, exhausted. You did well, Max said immediately. Exceptionally well. Tom laughed weakly. I didn't throw up. That feels like a win. It is. The fallout was swift. William filed another motion, angrier, sloppier. Contradicted his own statements. Overreached. Your husband is unraveling, Max said grimly. Which makes him dangerous. Tom nodded. I can feel it. That night, they sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between them heavy with everything unspoken. I don't want to cross lines, Tom said suddenly. I know the risks, the ethics. I don't want to pretend this connection isn't real. Max's voice was low. Neither do I. They didn't touch, didn't lean closer. But the acknowledgement itself felt like an earthquake, subtle, irreversible. Somewhere, fault lines shifted. And in the distance, something was already breaking. Chapter 12, The Quiet Before Impact. The arrest warrant was approved at 6:42 a.m. Max read the notification twice, then a third time the way he always did when something mattered. His face didn't change, but relief loosened something tight and painful in his chest. They have him, he told Tom over breakfast. Local PD picked William up at his office. Tom froze mid-bite. Just like that. Just like that, Max said. Violation of the restraining order. Witness intimidation. Enough probable cause to hold him. Tom set the fork down carefully, hands trembling. So it's over? Max didn't lie. It's contained. That distinction mattered. Tom nodded, absorbing it slowly. Contained meant fewer surprises, but not none. For the first time in weeks, Tom went for a walk outside. 2 security consultants shadowed him at a distance, unobtrusive but alert. The sun felt too bright, the city too loud, but Tom welcomed it anyway. He needed to remind his body that the world wasn't only locked rooms and careful whispers. When he returned, Max was on the phone, low voice, clipped sentences. Law enforcement. Again. They're transferring him, Max said when he hung up. County facility. Bail hearing tomorrow. Tom's stomach dropped. He could get out. He might, Max admitted. But not quietly, and not without conditions. Tom exhaled slowly. I hate that he still gets space in my head. That space will shrink, Max said. It just doesn't vanish all at once. The next few days were deceptively calm. Too calm. William's lawyer went silent. No new motions. No angry filings. Nothing inflammatory in the press. That's not normal, Max muttered one evening, reviewing updates. Tom looked up from his laptop. You're saying silence is bad? In this case. Yes. The bail hearing was postponed. Then rescheduled. Then postponed again. Administrative delays, they said. Max didn't buy it. Something's moving behind the scenes, he told the security lead. Assume he's trying to regain leverage. Tom overheard enough to feel the tension crawling back into his muscles. I'm tired of waiting for the other shoe, Tom said quietly later that night. Max looked at him for a long moment. Then let's give you more control. They adjusted routines again, self-defense drills tailored to enclosed spaces, emergency protocols rehearsed until they were muscle memory. Tom hated how familiar fear felt in his body. But he also felt stronger now. More grounded. I won't freeze again, Tom said during one session, breathless but steady. Not like before. Max nodded. I believe you. That belief mattered more than Tom expected. The legal line they'd acknowledged but not crossed hovered constantly. They were careful, too careful. No unnecessary proximity. No lingering looks. And yet, one evening the power flickered during a storm. The safehouse lights cut out for a split second before the backup generator kicked in. Tom startled anyway, heart slamming. Max was there instantly, hand hovering. Not touching. I'm okay, Tom said quickly. Just reflex. Max lowered his hand slowly. Good. The restraint in his eyes said everything else. Later, as rain hammered against the windows, Tom spoke into the quiet. When this is over, he said, not looking at Max. I don't want to pretend none of this happened. Max's voice was measured. Neither do I. That was all they said. It was enough. The call came at 3:14 a.m. Max answered on the first ring. Yes, he said sharply. Then his face changed. Tom sat up immediately. What is it? Max ended the call. His expression was grim, focused. William made bail. Tom's chest tightened. But, high amount, strict conditions, GPS monitoring. Max took a breath. But he's out. Silence pressed in. He's going to come for me, Tom said quietly. Max didn't deny it. He may try. Tom stood, pacing. So what do we do? Max looked at him, voice steady but fierce. We stay ahead of him. We don't underestimate him. And we don't let fear make our choices. Tom stopped pacing. I trust you. The words landed heavy. Max nodded once. Then listen to me carefully over the next few days. No deviations. No solo outings. If something feels off, we treat it as real. Tom nodded. Okay. William didn't come immediately. That was the worst part. A car spotted once, then gone. A false alarm at a security checkpoint. A burner phone ping near the safehouse perimeter. All inconclusive. All unsettling. He's probing, the security lead said. Testing reactions. Tom slept lightly, dreams shallow and tense. Max slept less. On the fourth night, Tom found Max on the balcony, staring out at the city. You don't have to carry this alone, Tom said softly. Max didn't look at him. I know. But you do, Tom said. Max finally turned. Because if something happens to you... He stopped himself. Tom stepped closer. Not touching, but near enough to feel the truth of it. Whatever this is, Tom said gently, it's already real. Max closed his eyes briefly. I know. Neither of them noticed the quiet sedan idling 3 blocks away, or the man inside watching a building, waiting for the smallest mistake. The quiet before impact had ended, and the next move would be violent. Chapter 13, Muscle Memory. Tom never stopped training. It just changed shape. The bruises faded, then returned in new places, earned this time, not inflicted. His ribs healed enough to take controlled impact. His shoulder regained range of motion, his balance sharpened. MMA wasn't about becoming violent. It was about reclaiming space inside his own body. Elena adjusted his stance with a firm tap of her shin. Again, but slower. Control first. Tom nodded, breath steady. He moved pivot, frame, elbow tight, hips back. The motion clicked into place, smooth and deliberate. Good. she said. You're not freezing anymore. He swallowed. I can't afford to. Training continued even after William made bail. Especially then. They moved sessions to unpredictable times and locations. Sometimes it was a private gym before dawn. Sometimes a padded room behind a community center after dark. The security consultants lingered nearby, bored-looking but alert. Max came when he could, not to interfere, never to hover. He watched from the edge of the mat, hands folded, eyes taking in everything. Tom's posture, his breathing, the way fear no longer hijacked his movement. You're different, Max said quietly after one session. Tom wiped sweat from his brow. So are you, Max huffed. Occupational hazard. The training paid off sooner than Tom expected. It started with a mistake, a calculated one. A decoy route leaked, a controlled exposure. Law enforcement wanted to see if William would take the bait now that he was monitored, restless, and convinced he was being outmaneuvered. Tom didn't love it. I don't want to be bait, he said flatly. You're not, Max replied. You're informed consent. Tom snorted. That's the lawyeriest thing you've ever said. Max didn't smile. I won't do this without you on board. Tom considered it, then nodded. Okay, but I want contingency control. You'll have it. They ran the plan twice. Then a third time. Tom practiced exits, practiced grounding, practiced breaking contact and creating distance. The goal wasn't to win a fight. It was to survive until help arrived. William took the bait 3 days later. A shadow too close at a grocery store parking lot. A figure moving against flow. The prickle along Tom's spine screamed wrong before his eyes confirmed it. Tom didn't panic. He pivoted, kept space, phone already in his hand. Code Amber, he said calmly into the line. William's voice cut through the air raw, furious. You think you can just disappear? Tom's heart slammed, but his body obeyed training. Back up, Tom said, loud enough to draw attention. He raised his hands, not in surrender, but in frame. You're violating the order. William lunged. Tom moved. He didn't try to trade blows. He angled off, used a parked car as a barrier, checked William's shoulder just enough to redirect momentum. William stumbled, surprised. That half-second mattered. Security closed in. Sirens wailed. William bolted. They didn't catch him, but they confirmed what Max already knew. He's willing to violate bail, Max said grimly that night, which means we're past deterrence. Tom sat on the edge of the couch, hands shaking now that the adrenaline drained. I didn't freeze. Max knelt in front of him without thinking. Then stopped, caught himself, stayed where he was. You didn't, Max said. You executed. Tom let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Guess the training's still ongoing. Max met his eyes. It's working. The next escalation came fast. William stopped being sloppy. A burner phone message arrived, short, precise. You can't outrun this forever. No location. No demands. Kidnapping risk just spiked, the security lead said. He's moving from intimidation to control. Tom felt the old fear coil, but it didn't own him. What changes? He asked. More drills, Max said. More unpredictability. And me? Tom asked. Do I get a say? Max's answer was immediate. Always. They doubled training. Clinch work. Escapes from holds. Using environment, door frames, walls, corners. Tom learned to breathe under pressure, to make space with bone and leverage instead of panic. One night, after a brutal session, Tom sat on the mat, back against the wall, exhausted. I used to think strength meant not getting hit, he said quietly. Max handed him water. And now it means getting back up without losing myself. Max's throat tightened. You've already done that. The legal pressure mounted alongside the physical. William's lawyer withdrew. New counsel came on, meaner, quieter. Motions flew. Allegations sharpened. Max countered all of it. You're allowed to live, Max told Tom one evening, voice firm. Not just survive a case. Tom nodded. Then don't disappear on me. Max didn't joke. I won't. They stood close, too close, then stepped apart. Lines held. Barely. The night before everything broke, Tom trained alone in the safe house gym. Shadowboxing, footwork, breath. He felt ready. Not invincible. Not fearless. But prepared. Upstairs, Max reviewed filings he hoped he wouldn't need. His phone buzzed once. An alert from the GPS monitor. A brief anomaly. Then nothing. Max stood, heart thudding. "Lockdown," he said into the radio. "Now." Downstairs, Tom's phone vibrated at the same moment. A text from an unknown number. "Found you." Tom's muscles went still, not frozen but coiled. The training wasn't over. It was about to be tested. Chapter 14. Impact. The lights went out first. Not all at once, just enough to disorient. The backup generator kicked in a heartbeat later, but the damage was done. The safe house had gone from controlled to compromised in under 2 seconds. Tom didn't panic. Training took over. He moved away from the center of the room, back to a wall, eyes scanning, breath steady. His phone was already in his hand, but the signal dropped to nothing. "No," he muttered. "No, no." The crash came from the rear entrance. Glass, metal, shouting. "Contact! Rear breach!" A voice barked over the security channel, distorted by interference. Tom ran. Not blindly, deliberately. He took the secondary corridor, the one drilled into him over and over. Left turn. Stairwell. Emergency exit. A body slammed into him before he reached it. Tom reacted instantly. Frame up, elbow tight, hips back. He drove his forearm into the attacker's collarbone and twisted free, adrenaline surging. The man staggered but didn't fall. Too many. Tom bolted. He hit the stairwell hard, taking the steps 2 at a time, lungs burning. A hand caught his ankle, he kicked back, connected, felt resistance give. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "I said stop running. William." The sound of it punched the air from Tom's chest. William stood at the bottom of the stairs, eyes wild, face drawn tight with obsession. He looked thinner, more dangerous. Tom's heart slammed, but his feet stayed planted. "Don't come closer," Tom said, voice loud, steady. "Police are already on the way." William laughed. "You really think that lawyer's going to save you?" Tom shifted his stance, creating distance. "He already has." William lunged. Tom moved. He slipped past the first grab, redirected William's arm, used the railing for leverage. They crashed into the wall, breath knocked loose. William swung wildly. Tom ducked, countered with a knee that sent pain shooting up his leg. But William was stronger than he remembered. Desperation made people reckless. A second attacker came from behind. Something slammed into Tom's head. The world tilted. He fought anyway, elbows, knees, anything to break contact, but hands closed around his arms, his shoulders. A hood went over his head, cutting off light, sound muffled and wrong. "Max!" Tom shouted. The name tore out of him, raw and furious. Then he was dragged. Max heard the alarm before the call. The safe house feed cut mid-sentence. His phone lit up with alerts, motion spikes, signal loss, breach confirmation. "No," he said sharply, already moving. "No, no." He was in his car in under 30 seconds. "Unit Alpha compromised," he snapped into the comms. "Target taken. Last known heading southbound." Sirens screamed as police units converged. Max drove like the city owed him answers, hands steady despite the fury clawing at his ribs. He replayed every plan, every contingency. Stay ahead. Don't underestimate him. He had underestimated how far William would go. Tom came back to himself in pieces. The smell of oil, the sway of motion, the ache in his wrists bound. His head throbbed where he'd been struck, vision swimming beneath the hood. "Let me go," Tom said hoarsely. William laughed from somewhere close. "Still telling me what to do." Tom swallowed, grounding himself. "Breathe. Assess. Wait, you think this is about him?" William continued, voice sharp. "That lawyer? He's just a symptom. You were always going to leave." Tom clenched his jaw. I left because you hurt me. Silence. Then impact. Not brutal but controlled. A shove that sent Tom crashing into the side of the vehicle. You don't get to rewrite this, William hissed. I decide how this ends. Tom didn't answer. He saved his breath. The vehicle slowed. Stopped. Hands yanked him upright, dragged him out. The hood came off. An abandoned warehouse. Dim lights. Echoing space. William stood in front of him, chest heaving, eyes blazing. You made me do this, William said. Tom met his gaze. No, he said steadily. You chose it. That was the wrong answer. William raised his hand, and sirens shattered the night. Red and blue lights flooded the space. Shouts, commands, chaos. William spun, panic flaring. On the ground. Now. William bolted. A gunshot cracked the air. Then another. Tom flinched as William went down hard, momentum carrying him forward before he collapsed. Silence slammed in. Police swarmed the space, weapons raised, voices sharp. Someone cut Tom's restraints. Sir, can you hear me? Tom nodded, dizzy, shaking. I'm here, he said. I'm okay. But the words felt unreal. Max burst through the police line seconds later. He didn't touch Tom, not yet, but his presence hit like gravity. You're safe, Max said, voice breaking just slightly. You're safe. Tom's knees finally gave. Max caught him. Lines be damned. Healing could wait. Survival couldn't. Chapter 15. After the fall. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and rain-soaked fabric. Tom woke slowly, consciousness returning in layers. Sound first, then light, then the dull ache that told him he was still very much alive. His head throbbed, ribs sore, wrists bruised where restraints had been cut away. Someone was sitting beside the bed. Max. He was leaning forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tight enough that his knuckles had gone pale. He looked exhausted in a way Tom had never seen before, like the armor had finally come off, leaving only the man underneath. Hey! Tom croaked. Max's head snapped up. Relief hit his face so fast it was almost painful to witness. Hey! He echoed softer. You scared the hell out of me. Tom managed a weak smile. Sorry. Don't, Max said immediately. Just don't. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that wasn't empty, just full of things that needed time. What happened to him? Tom asked finally. Max didn't flinch. William ran. Police gave clear commands. He didn't comply. He paused. He didn't survive. Tom closed his eyes. The emotions came tangled. Fear, relief, grief, something sharp and complicated that refused to be named. He didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't want it to end like that, Tom said quietly. I know, Max replied. You can acknowledge that without taking responsibility for it. Tom nodded. You're very good at that. Max's mouth curved faintly. Occupational hazard. The days that followed were a blur of statements, doctors, and carefully managed quiet. The charges didn't vanish just because William was gone. But they changed. The divorce concluded swiftly, posthumously, and clean. No more motions. No more threats hiding behind legal language. The case closed. Max signed the final paperwork himself. When he set the pen down, he didn't feel triumph. Just finality. Tom was discharged a week later. Physically, he would recover. Concussion symptoms faded. Bruises yellowed and softened. His body remembered how to heal. Mentally, it was messier. Some nights, he slept through without dreams. Other nights, he woke shaking, heart racing, convinced he'd hear William's voice again. Max never pushed, never hovered. He was there when Tom asked, and respectfully absent when he didn't. That balance mattered. 2 weeks later, they sat on opposite sides of the same familiar couch. The safe house now feeling less like a bunker and more like a place someone could actually live. I'm moving out, Tom said, not unkindly. Not far. Just my own place. Max nodded, steady. That's good. You don't sound relieved. I'm not, Max said honestly. But it's still good. Tom smiled at that. I'm continuing MMA, Tom added. Elena says I'm ready for sparring again. Carefully. Max huffed softly. I wouldn't dare tell you otherwise. Silence settled. This one was heavier. There's something we need to address, Max said finally, before assumptions get made. Tom's heart picked up, but he kept his voice even. Okay. The case is closed, Max said, which means the professional barrier that kept us contained no longer applies. Tom swallowed. And the personal one? Max met his eyes, expression open, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with the courtroom. That one still matters, Max said, because I'm not done grieving my wife, and you're not done healing, and neither of us deserves to be rushed into something that pretends otherwise. Tom let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I don't want to rush. I just didn't want silence to mean nothing. It doesn't, Max said immediately. It means care. Tom nodded. Then, maybe we start with honesty. And coffee. No expectations. Max smiled. Really smiled. For the first time since Tom had known him. It didn't erase the sadness in his eyes. It lived beside it. I'd like that, Max said. The first time they met outside crisis mode felt strange. Coffee tasted stronger. The world felt louder. They talked about small things. Music. Work. Tom's data models. Max's habit of reading case law before bed like it was a novel. Max spoke about his wife, not with collapse, but with quiet reverence. Tom listened without jealousy, without fear of being compared. There was room for both love remembered and love beginning. That mattered too. Healing didn't arrive in a single moment. It showed up in fragments. Tom sparring without freezing. Max sleeping through the night. Shared laughter that didn't immediately fade into guilt. They didn't touch much at first. When they did, it was deliberate. Earned. A hand on an arm. A shoulder leaned into another during a late movie. A kiss, eventually, soft, unhurried, full of permission to stop if either of them needed to. Neither did. One evening, months later, Tom stood in his own kitchen, sunlight spilling through the windows. Max leaned against the counter, jacket off, tie loosened. You happy? Max asked quietly. Tom considered it. I'm alive, and learning how to live without fear running the show. Max nodded. That sounds like happiness adjacent. Tom smiled. What about you? Max thought of his wife. Of the ache that would always exist. Of the way joy no longer felt like betrayal. I'm letting myself feel both, he said. And that's new. Tom stepped closer, not rushing, not hesitating. That's enough, he said. Max reached for his hand. Not to save him. Not to protect him. Just to walk beside him. Epilogue: What remains? A year later, the courtroom no longer haunted Max's dreams. It still challenged him. Still demanded precision, patience, and the sharp edge of his mind. But it no longer followed him home the way grief once had. He'd learned where to set things down. What to carry. What to leave behind. That morning he left early anyway. Tom was already awake, barefoot in the kitchen, sunlight catching in his hair as he leaned over the counter, laptop open beside a mug of coffee. Data models scrolled across the screen, orderly and elegant. You're up early, Tom said without looking. Big mediation, Max replied, loosening his tie. Low chance of miracles. Moderate chance of justice. Tom smiled. Your favorite odds. Max watched him for a moment longer than necessary. The sight of Tom relaxed, focused, safe. Still felt like something he hadn't earned but was grateful for every day. I'll be late, Max said. Text me when you're done, Tom replied easily. I've got training tonight. MMA never left Tom's life. It evolved, less about survival now, more about strength and discipline. Elena still coached him, still corrected his stance, still reminded him that power without control was just noise. Tom had learned control. He still had nightmares sometimes. So did Max. Some wounds didn't disappear. They became part of the landscape. The memorial sat on a quiet hill. Max went alone. He always did. His wife's name was etched into stone. the letters softened by time and weather. He placed fresh flowers at the base, standing there in silence, not begging forgiveness, not asking permission, just remembering. "I'm okay," he said softly. "I still miss you." The ache remained, but it no longer hollowed him out. He didn't rush away. He never did. That evening, Max came home to the smell of something slightly burnt. Tom stood in the kitchen, frowning at a pan. "I followed the recipe exactly." Max set his briefcase down. "That was your first mistake." Tom laughed. A real, unguarded sound. It echoed in the space, easy and warm. They ate anyway. Later, curled together on the couch, Tom's head resting against Max's shoulder. The city lights glowing beyond the windows, the world felt stable. Not perfect, stable. "You ever think about how close we came to not being here?" Tom asked quietly. Max nodded. "Sometimes. Does it scare you?" "No," Max said. "It reminds me to pay attention." Tom shifted slightly, fingers brushing Max's hand. "I like this life." "So do I," Max replied. They didn't say forever. They didn't need to. On the fridge, held by a magnet shaped like a crooked star, was a calendar. Court dates, training sessions, coffee plans, small, ordinary things. Life rebuilt itself quietly, not with grand declarations, but with presence and respect, and the understanding that healing wasn't an ending, it was a practice. They kept choosing it, together, and